Okay, we got a lot to talk about. The next chapter has begun. And I got some great news to report. Really good news, in fact. And I got some not so great news. Let's just call it really effing bad news. The great news we'll start with, because it's very seldom on this channel that I can open with good news, because of course, as preppers, we're cynics by nature. As the saying goes, scratch a cynic, you'll find an idealist. So it's not that we're negative, we're just realists, okay? But the great news is that we've averted a civil war. That is great news, okay? Our adversaries were not able to divide the populace in a way which would have been most beneficial for them. A Kamala victory would have been most beneficial for Vladimir Putin, a Xi Jinping, not because of anything Kamala herself would do that Trump wouldn't do, but because it would trigger widespread civil unrest. Before the election, Republicans and Democrats were polled, and it was found that 52% of Republicans lacked any faith in the integrity of the election process. Contrast that with 81% of Democrats who had faith in the election process. So clearly, my bad feelings yesterday stem from the fact that if Kamala won, we would have seen widespread civil unrest. That's not a preference statement. That is simply an observation, okay? Now, hopefully, people's faith in the system has been reinvigorated and people feel enfranchised once again. Because clearly a red wave is a statement of the integrity of your democracy. I mean, if that isn't, then I don't know what is. You got the Senate, you got the executive branch, you probably have the House, and you got the Supreme Court. So the great thing about this is, and I don't play politics, you guys know I'm an anti-establishment guy, and I believe that both sides are ultimately in the back pockets of the deep state. And I don't play into this idea that, you know, one side is the rebels and all this blah, blah, blah. No, that's not how it works. But the great thing about this is I don't have to hear those people bitch anymore about how they don't have a voice and they're disenfranchised and this whole victim mentality, which it's really every 4 years the victim ball gets passed. You know, now it's going to be the left who complains about being a victim, and then it's going to go back to, and it's the same old shit. And so ultimately, though, there is a movement in the same general direction, and that is towards World War III and economic collapse. And that is where we're heading today. Because let me take a look at the markets right now. Understand that in the last 4 years, okay, 4 years, the stock market has nearly doubled. It's nearly doubled in 4 years. Anybody who believes that you can sustain that type of growth and this pink cloud bullishness that we're seeing on day one is completely and utterly fucking delusional. The fact that the Dow Jones has ripped 3.4% today is a testament to the stupidity of the investment class. Because this is not only unsustainable, even if it were true that the market was going to double in the next 4 years under Trump in the same way that it did under Biden, and I don't believe for a second that that meant and that amounted to real economic prosperity for particularly the lower class, people who didn't have access to the stock market, which is like, 90% of people, obviously. Understand that that's called a market meltdown. That is unsustainable. There is nothing in the fundamentals that justifies a 1,500 move in the Dow in a day, on a day like today. There is nothing, okay? Absolutely nothing, especially when we're $36 trillion in debt. Now, interestingly, you guys probably don't follow my other social medias, but I talk a lot, okay? And another thing that I predicted was that if Trump won, you'd see the markets go up, you'd see Bitcoin go up because Trump is a Bitcoin bro, no conflict of interest there. And you would see gold probably flatten or go down, and you would see oil go up. And pretty much all of those things have happened. So oil today, in real dollar terms, because the dollar is up like 2% or something crazy, oil is actually flat if you look at the nominal number, but in real terms, oil today is far more valuable than it was yesterday. Were the dollar not to have gone up 2%, then oil would have went up 2% today. Likewise, gold is down 2.69%, and really gold is only down like 0.7% when you factor in the dollar that it's measured in. So these things, if you're a precious metals hodler, don't get consumed by this pink cloud hysteria. This is not going to last. It simply cannot mathematically last. Warren Buffett right now is going to be selling. I guarantee you he is going to be selling. Nobody is buying in. No big smart money is buying into this market at this point in time. This is a retail pump for the most part. Maybe there's some whales in there doing a swing trade, but this is a retail pump. Why? Because a war is coming. A big fucking war in the Middle East is literally right around the corner. Now that Trump has assumed the throne, and the first calls that he got were from Benjamin Netanyahu and Lindsey Graham. Okay? The two objectives, the main objectives of these guys, is to make war with Iran. And that's what we are going to see. Netanyahu spoke with President Donald Trump, and he was among the first to congratulate him for his victory. The conversation was warm and cordial, and the two agreed to work together for Israel's security and discussed the Iranian threat. What a surprise. Day one, discussing the Iranian threat. Isn't it also a coincidence that on the day of the election, Netanyahu decided to can his defense minister, Yoav Gallant? Why? Well, they said it was for a few reasons, because Netanyahu was trying to make Orthodox Jews partake in the war, and they didn't want to. And, Gallant had a different opinion about this stuff. But it has nothing to do with that. It likely has something to do with wanting to go to war with Iran. That's what this is about. And the guy that they've put in there is more hawkish. He has less military experience. Say what you want about Gallant and his evil grimace. Nonetheless, he has more military experience, and he was probably holding Netanyahu back from making some really stupid decisions, like going to war with Iran. Now that that's out of the way, and you have a guy who, I don't even know what rank he achieved in the military, but I think Gallant was like close to a general, if not a general. And this guy was nothing of the sort, okay? So that means that he's going to be a pushover. He's going to be yes man. Whatever Netanyahu and Trump want, that's what they're going to go for. And when you have an arrest warrant for Donald Trump in Iran, they're going to war. Okay, there is no doubt about it. In fact, Hezbollah made a point of escalating today, bombing Ben Gurion Airport and seemingly penetrating the Iron Dome and the THAAD and whatever else missile defense systems without much resistance. I believe 10 missiles hit. So we're going to see a ramping up of the war in Iran. You're going to see a ramping up of the war in Ukraine also, because people are about to get a rude awakening. Now remember, it's a red sweep, so there's no excuses at this point, right? Here's what's going to happen. Dmitry Medvedev made a statement yesterday with respect to Trump, or maybe it was 2 days ago. And it was something along the lines of Donald Trump thinks that he's going to be able to make a change in this conflict, but if he actually truly tries to, they're going to JFK his ass. That's what Medvedev said, okay? So what I think is going to happen, and people need to understand that there wasn't really a time during Trump's presidency where things got confrontational. He did things for optics. He went to North Korea. What happens when this time around Kim Jong-un just rejects the invitation? What happens when Vladimir Putin said, as he stated today, that there's not going to be a congratulatory call to Donald Trump? What happens when a confrontation actually arises. That's what I'm saying. Now, some people are going to say, oh, that's when he's going to take the gloves off and we're going to see what he's made of, right? We're going to see if this posturing is actually, going to be able to be backed up by anything. Because at the end of the day, American military capabilities are American military capabilities. They don't change just because of the commander-in-chief. The material realities, how many planes he got, how many bombs he got, the logistics of it all, that doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the decisions that the commander-in-chief makes on the basis of those things. And I'm quite certain that whatever the current chiefs of staff and commanders of the various strategic command and CENTCOM, whatever they're telling Biden, they're going to tell Trump the same thing, that these are the logistical realities, and this is why we can't do certain things. Now, there's going to be a lot of intimidation tactics, but the question is, will they work? Because remember, just before the election, the United States made a statement by putting strategic bombers in Qatar. 6 of them, in fact. These are nuclear-capable planes, clearly as a message to the Iranians. That wasn't Trump who did that. That was Biden who did that. Biden has sent $17 billion to Israel this year in terms of weapons and armaments. Of course, keeping it under the radar because they know it's not popular with their constituents, but they're doing it nonetheless. So here is what is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting, and why it's going to get dangerous. It's going to get dangerous because this is kind of an overused criticism of Trump, ego, narcissism. But let's just say that that's true, okay? Trump is all about looking good, okay? So what happens when one of these other leaders make Trump feel weak? Is he going to lash out and do something like Netanyahu is about to do against the advice of his military generals? There's a reason why they don't just start nuking Iran. I know some people don't understand that, but there's a reason why. Okay, the reason is primarily involved in the entire region blowing up into a regional conflict, which of course would see the destruction of all the oil and gas infrastructure, which would cause the price of oil to skyrocket. These are geopolitical realities that exist whether Trump's there or not. So now we get to see exactly what Trump is going to, how he's going to deal with his opponents when in the ring. Because I don't think, and I could be wrong, but the reality is different than it was 8 years ago. You're talking about, 8 years ago, there was no Ukraine war. We were working towards it because, in fact, Trump was one of the first people to give Ukraine weapons. There was no war with Iran raging. Yeah, there was a Soleimani thing, but we're still far away from where we are now. There was a trade war with the United States, but we weren't arming Taiwan to the teeth. And this is how you know it's just a continuity of government handoff, because Biden has basically now set the stage for Trump to carry the baton, right, into Iran. He put the bombers there. He made sure Israel was all taken care of. He kind of slowly transitioned support away from Ukraine to Israel, getting Trump ready to go for Israel. And this is how you know it's just two sides of the same bird, man. So don't lose sleep over this. If you're a dejected Democrat, the pendulum is going to swing back the other way. If you truly believe that we got 4, 8, 12, 16 years left, don't worry. It's going to go red, blue, blue, red, blah, 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 blah. Okay? You can call me black-pilled. You can call me whatever you want. It's just reality. Okay? They're going to give you the people in charge, the elites, they're not stupid. If they see that the people are upset, then they're going to give you the savior, okay? They're going to give you the hero. And because we're cognitive misers and we're so easily subdued by this type of marketing and this social psychology, the halo effect will grip people, and Elon Musk's here to save the day. Don't worry, X isn't a honeypot. I mean, Teslas like the one I'm in aren't collecting all of our data and aren't going to be used against us someday. Listen, man, this is much bigger than Trump or Harris. Understand that, all right? So, and the media, let's just talk about the media, because the media loves this. I even got the sense from CNN that they were really rooting for Trump. And this is going to be hard to believe. But you need to understand something, guys. It's like a cop who needs crime, or like a doctor who needs illness. A grifter needs something to grift against, okay? The media needs Trump. What was that thing? The Joker, when he told Batman, he's like, you complete me. He's like, I need you. The CNN needs a Trump to stay relevant. And so that's the catch-22. On the one hand, they might maybe ideologically don't align, but they still need him. It's like gun lobby groups, right? Why would you need a gun lobby group if there was no threat to come and get your guns? You know what I'm saying? So that's how it is. And you're going to see that. They're going to love this. And honestly, if you're a dejected liberal, at this point in time, just take this opportunity, take this beat down to recalibrate, get your bearings, figure out, what sort of frivolous loose ends you should have stopped droning on about. Focus on the core fundamental issues that allowed you to win so many votes last time. And for some, I understand what the comments are going to be related to that. People who will never have faith in the integrity of the election process. But when both candidates are largely controlled, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, in the integrity of the voting process, Tweedledee or Tweedledum, doesn't really matter. Now, countries, let's talk about Europe. What happens if Trump abandons Europe, which is not going to happen? Trump cannot abandon Ukraine, okay? There's something called the euro, and the euro is the prime competitor to the US dollar. All this nationalist talk, unfortunately, comes with a drawback in that if Trump pulls support from NATO, and by support right now is assisting Ukraine, whether we like it or not. If Trump decides to pull support, then that is going to increase the possibility of a rapprochement between Russia and Europe. Europe will continue to circumvent sanctions in the ways that they do and buy Russian gas instead of liquefied American gas. And the German war machine will continue to be powered by cheap Russian energy. So unless the United States fulfill their mandate of keeping the Germans down, and again, I don't speak this from preference, this is a geopolitical reality. Unless the United States stays in Europe, keeps the Germans down and the Russians out, the euro is going to strengthen. And if the euro strengthens, the United States currency decreases. So, that's that. That's the reality. There will be no rapprochement with Ukraine. Even the Russians are saying, what the fuck are you talking about? Medvedev's like, 3 months, 3 days, 3 weeks, the war's not going to end. Okay? And understand that in the next 70 days, shit can still happen. People can throw fits. Ukraine can still do things that can force the United States' hand. Because again, the United States cannot abandon Europe. All this talk about how we're going to have to go it on our own and blah, 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 that's going to come at the expense of the one and only global reserve currency, which right now, just today, has been inflated another 2.38% on the S&P 500, which is closing in on 6,000, which makes no material sense whatsoever, at all. And now you're talking about tariffs. You're talking about all of these things, which are bullish for gold. You're talking about BRICS, which is going to take off in a way that you never believed. You're talking about decoupling, a war in the Middle East. All of these things are bullish for commodities and terrible for the US dollar. Well, let's just see what happens. What do I know? It's incredible that there were so many fewer votes this time than last time. Now, some people are going to chalk that up to misogyny, and it could just be that the American populace is not ready for a female leader. Because at the end of the day, was Harris worse than Biden? Really? Was she? I mean, maybe some people might think so, but Joe Biden's performance last time, was he actually better than Harris? I don't know. Maybe it's just that people were fed up with the bullshit. The masks, the washroom bullshit. There was just certain things that I think really brought the party down. And I guess this is what you would expect to see after the 4 years that we had. Okay. Now, interestingly, though, you really do have to look at the markets and say, this is something the Democrats didn't talk about. They didn't talk about how the markets have practically doubled. Okay, we know it's all fake because we know that the inflation is through the roof. They could have talked about how inflation is down more, when we all know that's bullshit, because even inflation going down, even if it went to zero, the price hikes are still there. The cost of living is still way too high. But instead they focused on all these petty issues, these bullshit issues, which I think are, like abortion and things like. I'm not saying that it's not entirely right. They're trying to win the female vote, but at the expense of what? All right, at the expense of what fundamentally made the Democrats, which is, I don't know, whatever they would say that is. So I think it's very likely that Trump will be manipulated by his deep state cronies like Lindsey Graham and Mike Pompeo and friends and all the rest. And we're not going to see much fundamental change. You can't, and look, we're not too far away from another McCarthyist resurgency. Because remember, right now people on the right are kind of sympathetic to Russia. But there's a lot of real diehard Republican purists who still are like anti-commie, anti-Eastern to the core. And you'll see a resurgence in that. That's how they're going to bring it back. Okay, but first they need to vilify the Russians somehow in order to rekindle that good old McCarthyist anti-Russo sentiment on the right, which I think Ukraine has been used as a bit of a scapegoat by the right for a lot of the problems. And indeed, I mean, Ukraine has done nothing to counter this when they lump in their cause with all of these aspects of the culture war, right down to their spokesperson who changes genders every year, which, whatever. But it's just, the American people had enough of that. So they came to associate Ukraine with the downfall of America. The reality is the amount of money spent in Ukraine does not even nowhere near, not even, if you had a graph, you wouldn't even see it on the graph compared to what was spent on a country like Afghanistan. And it is nowhere near the amount of money that's going to be lost should people start divesting from the U.S. economy, internationally, that is. Now, I think this pink cloud in the markets is going to be very short-lived. Myself personally, yeah, I have some investments. I'm not, I don't give a shit either way. I know there's going to be people, oh, you're mad because Kamala lost, and I get the same amount of criticisms, and this is the problem, just being, a guy in the middle who's like trying to figure things out, is you're going to get railed on by everybody. But I see my investments going up today, but I can tell you one thing, I'm getting out. I mean, look, Buffett is still stockpiling cash. I'm doing what Buffett's do. At this point in time, I'm not saying that he's infallible. He can make mistakes too. But at this time, man, I'm out. I'm getting out. These valuations make no sense whatsoever. People are presuming that Trump is going to bring about world peace, which makes zero sense whatsoever, because Russia wants Ukraine, and if they get Ukraine, they're going to become empowered. It's going to empower the Chinese. to embargo Taiwan, which is what they're getting ready for. And now smack dab in that 2027 projection, you're going to have Donald Trump as president. The Iranians are still going to continue to fight with the Israelis, which is where the real focus is going to be. There's going to be no world peace. There is no reality where there is world peace. This is game theory, okay? And it's going to have to come to a head. And that means that the U.S. markets are going to inevitably decline. And if they don't, that means it's a markup melt-up, and getting out of cash would be well advised. But on a day like this, I mean, who's buying, man? Who's buying at the top of the Dow? If you look at a graph, just go and look at a graph of the Dow Jones or the S&P 500 in the last 20 years, and you tell me if that's sustainable. Now, I know the stock market tends to go up, but nowhere near as fast and as exponential as it's been in the last 4 years. Not even close. There's a massive, to call it a correction is not even correct. We could see a black swan in the truest sense. We could see another virus. Another virus could happen. It could happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it did at this point in time. Something is going to come along that is going to cut these markets back down to size. And it's going to prune them back. Prune back all of these suckers right now that are not doing anything. You know, there's no rational explanation for these valuations in the market. There's no reason why the S&P should be close to $6,000. Again, I have investments. I'm making money from it. But I'm telling you, it can't be sustained. Why? Because I hedge my bets. I always hedge my bets. But this crypto thing, yeah. I mean, according to the Ukrainian commander-in-chief Syrskyi, actually, according to Ukrainian MP Mariana Bezula, he said that the commander of the armed forces of Ukraine was preparing to withdraw troops from the Kursk region because they had fulfilled their task of preventing a Russian attack into Sumy. Maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel there, but I doubt it. Trump can't dish Europe, and Trump's going to go all the way in Iran. And the dominoes will continue to fall. Because what's to stop Putin from wanting to go further? Especially if we're preoccupied and bogged down in Iran. It's going to be interesting. You know, change is good, man. Change is always good. And even if you don't, again, if you're a person, you're not a Trump person, and you're feeling that the world's ending today, don't, because this is exactly what needs to happen. This is the cycle of birth and rebirth and death. And, you know, there's always, this is a necessary beatdown that's required for Democrats to cut the bullshit and get back to whatever the fundamentals are of the party that made people like them in the first place. So, yeah, if you're a person who plays this political game, fret not, because, you know, the tables will turn once again. The bullshit pendulum will swing back in the other direction. And, you know, we'll be having a different conversation, but it'll be a very similar conversation, but just a different tint to it in 4 years. Granted, we don't go to nuclear escalation. Now, again, I'm very worried. I'm going to finish with this because I said there was bad news. I'm very concerned that a Trump that was backed into a corner could be very volatile. A Trump that had its ego hurt could be incredibly volatile. We've never seen that because Trump has never really been dissed, you know, on the international stage. He's averted. He came at a time when there was no hostility with Ukraine and Russia. There was no real war in the Middle East. There was no, you know, there was stuff going on with China, but it wasn't that confrontational. But what's going to happen when somebody hurts his ego? Is he going to do something that make an executive decision that takes us in the wrong direction? It's very possible. We haven't seen him under those conditions yet. But now we're going to see it, because if Putin does in fact snub Trump, I think that you're going to see another side of Trump come out. The side that all the fuss is about, you know, the side that everybody fears or believes is there. This ruthless, aggressive individual that is going to come out swinging when the fight starts, Mike Tyson style. Maybe. I just seen a license plate from a person that said, "I'm old." Yeah, we're all getting older, that's for sure. One final thought for you. Don't get complacent. I could see it from a mile away. Everybody's going to start getting complacent. I don't need to prep anymore. That's fine. I assure you, definitely the left is going to be prepping like you would not believe. Back in 2016, I predicted that when Trump won the first time, I said, you are going to see a militarization of the left unlike you've ever seen before. And then, of course, we had George Floyd, and we had all that stuff. And that you were going to see a move towards the progressives were going to start entering into prepping. And that's what you're going to see now. The left is going to start prepping, okay? And the right is going to start resting on their laurels. But don't do that, because just don't do that, because the shit it's still going to hit the fan. Yeah. Anybody who thinks that, okay, now everything's fine. I'm not saying, live in fear, but just remember that things can still go bad. Things very much can still go bad. And indeed, there could be attempts to sabotage the Trump campaign as well. So keep that in mind. Hope I gave you something to think about today, folks. See you on the flip side, the Day X World War III update. I'm feeling better. I'm actually feeling close to, I'd say, I don't want to jinx it, but I'm going to say like 88%. And man, that was a rough October. Ugh. I've never had a cold where my progress was so incremental. Like I felt maybe 1% better every day. It was just the worst kind of illness ever. And I'm so glad I'm in the clear. And I can start riffing and ranting again on a daily basis. We got some great videos coming up. And it's going to be nice, hopefully, if there's a reprieve in global hostilities, which there won't be. But if there is, we can start releasing more primarily prepping content once again and get back to basics, get back to the roots of the channel. But I'm guessing that probably in the next few days, shit's going to hit the fan somewhere. So I will keep you apprised. Thanks for watching, my friends. Take care. If you want to support the channel, CanadianPreparedness.com.